See, Springbank really prides himself on keeping their traditional methods the way they always were, really, which is it's very interesting for tourists to see. It's very interesting for the guys that are doing the job as well. It's really cool to see that the process hasn't changed over so many years. The only tiny little bits of technology we've got here would maybe be a turner, which is also, I'm pretty sure, been here for about 40 years. So, you know, it's been the same process since the guys that started here in 1828 have been here doing the same process since, working the barley in the same way, working the floors the same way, the kilns the same way. For me working in this part of the distillery, I've been on the people, there's been guys working here for over 30 years, and from their day one to now it's not changed. Everything's exactly the same. So I've worked with these people near 20 years, 30 years, and every one of them's taught in the same way, and nothing's changed with them. They've just passed this information on to the next people and the next people, and it all keeps going, running smoothly. So we must be doing something right if it's going all this.
Born and bred Campbelltown, yeah. Haven't moved, left school, been working ever since. Been with the company now. This has been to my 30th year. I can remember over where the gasworks over there used to be the primary school, and I can remember when I was very young, walking down Glebe Street and looking in the malt barns at Springbank and watching the men doing the maltings and shouting in the windows and running away. And now you've been there, seen it, done it, and that's it. That's a long time ago now. You know, so.
This is a very typical kind of Dunwich style warehouse. The differences in here is the floor itself is very cold, it's dirty, it's mud. So everything in here with the damp and the mould is affecting the kind of characteristics of the whisky, the way it's lying in the cask over the next however many years.
Good evening and welcome to the first tasting of our Online Tasting Week 2021. You join us here in the deepest, darkest recesses of Warehouse 3, live from Campbelltown. My name's David. This joker to the left is Grant Macpherson. This clown to the right is Nicole Lindsay. And no, we're not a failed 80s pop act. We are the Springbank and Kilkerran sales team. And we've got a great honour tonight to be showcasing this very special tasting, these single casks of Kilkerran, which were bottled exclusively for the 15th anniversary. And yeah, we're sharing those with you tonight. Yeah, you'll appreciate we've got a lot of drams. There's 13 single casks for this project. And because we're superstitious here in Campbelltown, we had to add another one to make up to the 14. So we've got a hell of a lot of drams to get through. So I think the best way to start this off is kick off with a dram. So the first dram is going to be the Bourbon Wood, which is bottled exclusively for the UK market. And as Grant is our UK sales manager, you're going to introduce that for us.
Yeah, welcome everyone. First whisky we're trying tonight is the Kilkerran exclusively bottled for the UK market. It is 53.1% alcohol. And there was 324 bottles from this single cask. One of the reasons it was picked for the UK is I felt it complemented what sort of the market needs and wants, and gives it the true style of what I feel Kilkerran is all about, matured in bourbon cask. You've got lovely fruity notes to it, lovely, that vanilla fruitiness goes right through.
Very fruity.
Yeah, we were sitting in a cold, damp warehouse with all the taste notes tonight might be earthy, musty.
Yeah.
We're setting it away.
Tongue cloth.
So I'm sure you're all cozy at home, but yeah, we're.
Who's
It's not too
It's not
cold.
too
It's
bad.
warmer
No.
than we expected.
Whose idea was it to be in the warehouse? I'm pretty sure it was Ronald Watson, who handedly isn't here and at home in the comfort of his living room.
Yeah, cozy.
Yeah, but as you say, Grant, this is very fruity, vanilla, has that lovely sort of Kilkerran waxiness.
Also got to remember, it's 15 years old, and it was spent 10 years in a bourbon puncheon before we transferred into the bourbon barrel for a further 5 years. So yes, there were single casks, but there was 2 different casks. The whole tasting tonight, they started off in the bourbon puncheons of the port, rum, Madeira, etc., and then transferred into bourbon barrels for 5 years.
Yes. Are you going to explain why this came about, why we've done this sort of reverse maturation?
Well, the whole story goes back to doing a bottle offer or a 6-pack offer. So when we first started back in 2004, we didn't want to go down the route of selling casks to private individuals. But it's a huge investment, and you're waiting for that sort of 10 years' time. First of all, the plan was to bottle Kilkerran as 12 years old. It always was the plan when we first started. But we thought it's a huge investment, building, put all the stills, washbacks, everything inside it, production costs every year. And so what can we do to try and get some money in at the start? And we knew our sister company, Springbank, selling casks to private individuals was an administrative nightmare. So how do we go about getting money in? And we throw in this bottle offer. So the first 6 casks filled the distillery in 2004 from the 6 different cask types. And that's where we first sort of got all the money in. And after these were bottled as 10 years old, we always had a backup cask put aside just in case the first 6 casks didn't happen, the leakages, etc. And
Which has been known.
It has been known, yes. So these are where a great opportunity for us to try and do these exclusive bottlings. That's where the whole story came about.
So this was supposed to happen during our physical malts festival in 2020. It was all planned because that we were celebrating the 15th anniversary the year before. So,
Yeah, kind of we were slightly off. It would have been in the sort of celebrating the 15th year and our 16th year, but how it came about.
But now it's the 17th year. Just
Yeah,
about. It's the anniversary round about.
Right now, yes, and I think first distillation was about, or mashing is in March.
Yeah, so into April was in the first, so yeah, just over 17 years.
Yeah, so 17 years going strong.
Yeah.
Wow. I've not tried this with any water yet, but I'm tempted to put a drop in just to see how it opens up.
If anybody's looking for a use for the little bottles after drinking all tonight, perfect little water droppers.
Yeah, so it's I see a few of you are getting the droppers out and mentioning them there. Not in a bad way, actually. Some people are saying it's fantastic little droppers. So these are not as tricky to extract as the last ones.
Yeah, the last ones were pretty
They
hard.
do it pretty well for an additional use, letting out just a wee drop of water, not too much in your whiskies.
Mm-hmm. Is there any feedback on the dram for the UK? So Grant, it was interesting, your selection process there, you thought this was sort of quite suited to the UK market. You always told me it was just the biggest cask and you wanted the most bottles.
I didn't want to say that on camera, but you just you have. But yeah.
I think you made a pretty good choice. I don't think there's going to be any complaints with that, to be honest.
I like bourbon mature whiskey as well. I've got to be honest. People ask me what is my preferred cask type, and I think bourbon brings up more of what the distillery has to show, and I think certainly thought it was well received in the UK market.
Mm-hmm.
The bourbon casks tend to let the spirit or the whiskey character
Shine
through.
Yeah, it's not sort of dominated by the heavier characteristics of a sort of porter, but also.
It's an interesting one doing these 6 different cask types. Certainly, the still characteristic does come through in all of them, which is good as well.
So these are only 1 CL, but I managed to keep a little bit back to do a side-by-side comparison with the next dram, which is the other bourbon wood we did. And this was a cask which was split amongst 3 markets: Austria, Canada and South Korea. So you can tell that we had more markets than single casks, so we had to make some difficult choices throughout this process, and sort of these were bottled for selected markets, and some casks were split between some of our smaller markets. So this is one such cask.
Yep, I hope you've all got the little tasting cards in front of you to get all the information where the casks were split.
There's that many drams, I think it's quite handy for us as well,
Oh,
actually.
it's a handy reference, yeah.
Very handy reference.
So there's a lot of whiskies in this tasting as well tonight, and there's some people say, you know, it's not a very big pour, but I think by the time we've all had 14 drams, will be that'll be enough whiskey for the night, perhaps.
Yeah, it's a tasting, not a session.
Yeah, and it was. I mean, we didn't have a whole lot of this whiskey to play with. We had a couple of bottles, a complete set of just 2 bottles of each edition. And so, in order for as many people to be able to try it as possible, we thought these smaller drams would go further and allow more people to take part. So, there's method in the madness.
Yeah, I think that's a very important point to raise. These, we don't have any more of this whiskey from these initial casks, so this is a very sort of significant tasting, and I doubt maybe somebody else has managed to collect all the bottles from the series, but I'm not sure if they would have. So to be able to take part in this tasting and have all these side by side is it's a pretty sort of pivotal point, I think, for the company.
If anyone knows of any other tastings that have taken part or are due to take part where someone did manage to collect all of the editions, let us know in the chat, because we're not aware of any at the moment. As far as we know, this is the only opportunity to try the whole set in one tasting. So, and the last opportunity.
And the last, yeah.
First and last.
Yeah. So, keep 2 bottles aside for tastings of this. We don't have huge archives. We're all about putting the whiskey on the market and getting bottles opened and drunk and enjoyed. But yeah, we keep normally 2 bottles aside for doing future tastings, etc. And this is one opportunity.
So this second whiskey was bottled for Austria, Canada and Korea, and it's a strength of 53.5%. In total there were 306 bottles, and that would have been split between the 3 markets.
Yeah. Do you guys pick up much of a difference between the 2 casks? I thought the first one was maybe slightly more sort of fruity, and there's more of a sort of woodier note to the second one.
We even had a licorice coming through in this one as well.
Which is something that I often find in Kilkerran whiskies. And I believe that one time we were talking about them and doing our tasting notes, and this licorice or aniseedy characteristic comes through for me often. And Finlay had said that quite often you detect that, or you do detect that, and then you make spirit, and so it's quite probable that you do find it in whiskies as well.
Yeah, even the sort of peat is sort of slightly more pronounced for me in the end of the second one there. Kilkerran is obviously lightly peated, sort of 10 to 12 parts per million, I think we say.
So for these whiskies, these would all have been made with that 10 to 15 ppm barley. So all of the barley would have been malted at our sister distillery, Springbank, to make these.
That's correct, yeah. Oh.
Does anyone have a preference between the first 2 bourbon casks, the 2 bourbon editions in this?
I'm going to say I quite like the fruitiness of the first one, but they each have their own characteristics. Pretty good in their own right.
And even starting the tasting straight into cask strength whiskies, there's nothing shouting out add water to them. They're so smooth, even at the cask strength.
Yeah. I think there's a few people agreeing with David and liking pour number 1 so far.
Are all those people from the UK sticking up for the home cask?
I'll be asking, when's the next one going?
Come on, where's the Austrians and the Canadians and South Koreans?
So this is our first day back in the office today, after almost 14 months of being working or furlough followed by working from home. So It's quite a good way to start the
I think
the
so.
working week.
No, shock to the system being in an office
Start the working week,
environment,
actually, yeah.
and then straight into the warehouse afterwards. Happy days.
But it's really nice to be back.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've all missed, I think, the social interaction, the contact.
It's funny, we have group discussions online on a daily basis when we're working from home, and might go on for maybe an hour or so,
Mhm.
maybe half an hour work discussion, and then what's happening in the world, research, daily catch up.
In fact, we had a bit of a, what we call a lot of things that we do spring bank isms. And today we were back in the office for the first time. Not per se sitting in the same room as such, but we still proceeded to have our daily video calls, just in different parts or different rooms within the same sort of complex. So yeah.
Yeah, necessitated out of the fact that Nathan wasn't in the office,
Yeah.
and we weren't letting him getting away with ducking out of this sort of daily meeting. So we made sure he was involved. That was a shock to the system, eh, Nathan?
Yeah, Nathan's behind the scene doing everything here.
Yeah.
Nathan's not here.
Right. I don't know about you guys, but I am going to pour my number 3 dram now,
I think it's a good time, yeah.
which is a distillery exclusive. So this was the rum cask, which is bottled as a distillery exclusive. So we wanted to make sure if people made the journey here to Campbelltown and did a tour of the distillery, they had a chance to buy a distillery exclusive. So we thought the rum cask actually worked really well with Kilkerran, if I remember rightly. So let's see if I do remember rightly.
Yeah, so 324 bottles from this cask. A great talking point as well about where we get the cask from. I mean, 6 casks were in, well, Frank McCarty was the man behind it all, but he spoke to Willie Taylor from Broxburn Cooperage to source these casks for doing the first 6 casks. And normally when we're doing tastings, people ask, well, where do you get your rum casks and that from? Well, we've got a sister company, Caddenheads, at one point bottled old, mature rum, and we had fast stocks of rum casks. So when they were bottled here at the distillery, why not fill new spirit with them? So we know the quality in these rums, so perfect opportunity to fill them with Springbank or Glengyle.
And I think rum casks, just by their nature, that they give you that sort of complementary, sort of fruity, sort of tropical fruit note, which you quite often get from Kilkerran as well. So it sort of emphasises that pretty well.
This is a Demerara rum cask.
We've got a question here from Kenny. He's wondering why we're looking to get into other markets when the demand is obviously quite high for our whiskies, and we struggle really to keep up with the demand in our own country. I don't know if that's something that we would necessarily say that we are doing. I don't think we are looking to go into new markets. These are existing markets which have been supporters of Kilkerran. Perhaps in times before it was in such quite high demand as a new distillery or a reopened distillery. But perhaps
Yeah, I mean,
I
suppose generally speaking, we introduced Kilkerran to those markets where we had an established Springbank presence, and we're using the same importer. But rest assured, Kenny, we're not entering any new markets, haven't done so really for a few years. You'll appreciate that demand is quite significant for all our whiskies, including Kilkerran now. So it doesn't make sense for us to dilute our stock even further and frustrate more people. I'm sure we share your frustration, even with the online tasting week and getting bottles and things like that. So yeah, I think we're probably close to business for new markets and for another good decade at least.
Yeah.
So yeah, we want to make sure we have enough Kilkerran and enough Springbank for our own distillery shop, let alone new markets. And that's something we actually find quite hard to do.
Probably a good talking point about production levels as well, because at the moment we're producing just over 90,000 litres at Glengyle Distillery. First few years of production, when we started in 2004, we were distilling probably about 3 months. Then yes, we did cut it back to about 3 weeks production, 4 weeks, but then we haven't increased that back up. And in comparison, if you came here to the distillery at Springbank about 4 or 5 years ago and asked us a production level, we were sitting probably about 120,000 litres. So we're not far off that at Glengyle just now. So.
Yeah, that's it. And there's increased production. I guess, we'd all love to see Glengyle operating sort of a full-time standalone distillery. Right now, it's our guys at Springbank who operate Springbank and then move over to Glengyle for 3 months of the year. And there'll be a point where we'd love to have this completely standalone production team for Glengyle. Maybe we'll get there at some stage, hopefully, and do that. But it's not just a case of employing more people, it's really having the extra capacity and warehousing and everything that goes along with it. So, one for the future.
One for the future, yeah, because we do try and make sure maturing it all on site, bottling it all here in Campbelltown. So there is aspects we want to make sure it's all done locally, and it's like, what can we physically do without compromising that? So it's and there is a long-term future of how we can improve that and what can we do more. If it means employing more staff, I'm sure the company certainly are all favour for it, but step by step.
Someone on the chat's also asking which distillery, if we know the distillery specifically that the rum casks came from. And I don't think that's something that we would normally sort of share, but the Demerara rum industry is obviously very small, having looked into it a little bit more recently. And certainly now, whether or not it was the same when this was produced and when we got the rum casks, but Demerara rum is named after the place and not in fact the sugar, which probably a lot of people are misconceived about.
Maybe the sugar's named after the place.
Maybe, yeah, it probably is. So the Demerara rum industry is very small now because all of the existing distilleries, lots of them have closed, and there were only in more recent history 4 still in operation, which have now merged. So it's produced. There's only one Guyanese producer, which is the Demerara Distillers Limited, which primarily produced the Eldorado rum. So whether or not that was still the same case back 15 years ago, I'm not sure, but certainly it would seem that perhaps.
Yeah, I think the significant change between even 15 years ago and now is when we took casks in before, there wasn't the same sort of hunger and appetite to know about the provenance of these casks, and there's many different types of rums, as you say, but the classification we have in the old notes are purely rum cask, and that's as far as it goes. So it's only really sort of in the last few years, especially as our audience, our market has become more intrigued about the maturation styles and the provenance. Everybody wants to know the provenance of what they're eating and drinking. We do that too, and our record keeping is obviously much better now as well.
Because we want to know ourselves doing tastings, we're not talking about it. It's bourbon, it's rum, it's sherry, but if we know exactly where these casks are coming from, first fill, second fill, certainly the audience are looking for that, and even for our knowledge as well. It's really handy to certainly trace where these casks came from.
Quite interestingly, actually, we've got a question from Dom. He's asking if we plan to mature Kilkerran in any more unusual casks, such as tequila, mezcal, or calvados. So more unusual maturations, but I'm not sure that is really the focus at Kilkerran or at Glengyle Distillery. We do experiment a lot, but more with the production process, so different distillation techniques, or playing around with the ppm of our whiskies, as you'll know if you're following the distillery and the releases as of the last few years. We've got the heavily peated range. We're also distilling unpeated whiskies as well. So whether or not we'll look into maturing in these more unusual casks, I'm not sure.
I think you're right. The focus has been really on building up the core range by using the core range and not using these sort of single casks to supplement that. And if we're filling casks, doing if we do a big batch of sort of tequila or mezcal or something, that's probably going to take away from a future 12-year-old or 16-year-old, which we don't really have a huge amount anyway. Every case that we have is pre-allocated, sort of rationed at the start of the year, so we don't want to necessarily take away from that. I think the different production techniques that we do is triple distilled is absolutely fantastic. The heavily peated range we do now is also great. So I think we're quite happy sort of sticking with the sort of core cask, your bourbons and your sherries.
We have experimented, go back in 2015, where we've done various single casks for markets, like Calvados, Chateau Lafite, etc. So we have done a few different cask types over the years. We still have ones maturing away for. Is it something we probably put on the market, or is it just these sort of limited editions, etc.? That's the.
Yeah, these little casks are handy when we do a virtual tasting week or a malts festival or something like that. We don't have huge amounts to do a release. But
to be able to offer something interesting and more unusual in a tasting such as tonight.
It's always good when you're a new distillery. Okay, we always, Frank, the man behind it, and he knew what style of spirit he wanted to put on the market. New distillery, you're always kind of want to experiment and see how it suits in casks, what age is preferred, etc. So having a phase of the cask types, experimenting phase of the cask types also is beneficial for us as well. The style, I think, Kilkerran, it's proven really well, bourbon and sherry and stuff as well. I've been doing this 15 sets as well.
Just to bring it back to the sets, what did we think of the rumwood? I don't think we've really sort of touched upon that too much, but
lots of people are really enjoying the tropical fruit flavours coming through in the rum.
Lots of sort of coconut shavings in it.
And it's probably time, actually, with all of these whiskies to get through to move on to the Madeira maturation.
I think so. I've got it in my hand here, ready to go. So
the Madeira casks came from Henriques and Henriques. Madeira wine obviously comes from the island of Madeira. And what makes, obviously Madeira wine then is a fortified wine, of which we get lots of different fortified wines, but what makes Madeira different is the maturation process is carried out in a sort of greenhouse style. So it's matured in casks in rooms that are quite high temperature. So it makes it a wee bit different. That's what makes Madeira different from the other fortified wines.
That's it's pretty stunning. My preconception of what I imagined it to be was it was going to be much sort of darker and richer, very light and very fruity, very fruity. Is it just me or can I see my breath in here?
Yep,
it's pretty chilly in here.
It's getting cold there. It's only 180 bottles from this single cask.
This was an exclusive bottle for Taiwan.
And I was not in the sales team actually quite yet when these single casks were released for the 15th anniversary. I joined. What month was it that you sent them out? Was it in the summer or the? Do you remember? It was just before I think I arrived sometime.
Probably would have been about September.
September. So yeah, maybe the month before I joined the team. So I wasn't here to sort of be part of the process of deciding which markets they went to. Were you looking after the Taiwanese market then?
Yeah, I was indeed. So you guessed how did we select what cask for who? Yeah, so I mean the selection process really was the sales team in a massive pub brawl, and we sort of around in the office, samples on the table, people go through and sort of select the favourites, and you sort of have an understanding of what some markets like. Some markets might prefer sort of darker, richer, more sherried influenced whiskey in comparison to the markets which might prefer sort of a lighter sort of bourbon style. So you sort of gear your casks sort of that way, I suppose, so it's a sort of educated guess. But above all, every single sample that we had, we thought was outstanding. There was no sort of duff casks in there. They're all very good. So there's absolutely no complaints from any importer about the casks that they got.
So, so someone's asking about the maturation process of these, and that's quite unusual as well because this is essentially like a reversed maturation we were talking about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not full maturation or finishes. It's actually kind of flipped on its head, and it's the other way. So yeah, Grant, you maybe.
Yeah, so they spent 10 years in the specific cask type, if it's bourbon, rum, sherry, port, Madeira, and then after that they were transferred into bourbon barrels. So initially we obviously wanted to do the tiny sets, and there was the surplus cask, the remnant casks. We wanted to kind of, these cask types were given a huge influence of that said cask type, and we wanted to mature these on for a further length of time, and that's why we put it back into mostly sort of refill bourbon, and just sort of mature them on to do that for another 5 years.
So to keep them back, but to not overpower.
Exactly. You know, if you have something like an olive also or a port maturation for that full 15 years, the port influence is certainly going to dominate the style of the spirit, the characteristics there. So you're sort of that sort of 10 years in influence, and then put it back into bourbon, so it brings it back, and you're getting maybe more of the sort of core characteristics coming through again. What do you guys think of the Madeira?
It's lovely, rich flavours to it. The nose is fantastic. Even sitting in here in the cold, damp earthen floor.
I've got someone's given a really cool tasting note, which I've never heard before, but I really like it. They're getting a smell like the brown skin of a freshly cracked peanut.
Okay,
which
yeah.
sounds, that's quite inventive.
Mm-hmm. I'm just looking at the strength. This is slightly lower than the previous three at 51.1% as well. But you know, these are probably quite dangerous whiskies that they don't necessarily feel like they're of cask strength like this.
And were they all at cask strength, or was that the marrying strength?
No, these have all been cask strength, yeah. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it gives you the freedom to add a bit more water to dilute it to, you know, to your required taste.
Yeah, 'cause that's one of the big debates, you know. Why did you keep it at cask strength, or why do you not reduce it down to 46% to get a few more bottles? But doing them at cask strength, it is giving the drinker that option of playing with water and seeing how it enhances, more flavours coming out, etc. with adding water.
Yeah, you're presenting the cask in its sort of purest, most natural form at cask strength. I think it's the right way to do these.
So someone's asking if these whiskies are all sold already. Yeah, these whiskies that we're trying tonight's tasting are whiskies that we had kept 2 bottles back of each single cask edition for our archive. So we do that quite often just so that we have special releases that we can pluck out of our archive when we have tasting events or our malts festival, which is what these were originally planned to be part of as a tasting. So these whiskies were bottled back in 2019, and different markets around the world that we supply were given either a single cask or a share of a single cask, and these different cask maturations were selected depending on really sort of with the market in mind and the sort of preference of the people there. That was considered, I suppose. So yeah, they are all sold out, and we've selected these bottles. The remaining 2 bottles in each set in the set from our archive to put this special tasting on. So sadly, this is the last opportunity
we can't do this again.
to try them.
Unfortunately,
That's it.
It's really the first and
Make most
last
of it.
time.
Yeah.
First and last time that anyone's had the opportunity to try every one of these bottles, which were sent to markets all around the world. We've brought them together to be able to try them in one tasting.
A few of you will remember this tasting was planned for the open day last year. Unfortunately, during the business crisis, we couldn't have that happen. So I thought, do we keep it for when it's safe and well for everybody to visit the distillery again, or do the online festival?
Yeah. I mean, at the going rate, we'll be celebrating our 18th anniversary with these 15 single casks. So I think now's the right time to do it. I've just added a bit of water to that, and I think it wouldn't be controversial. I think it helped open it up, and it's even better. And sort of changed the profile to more sort of chocolates and things like that in there.
And we've got a question from Dave as well. Dave was asking if we fill our casks at a lower ABV, because 51, 53, these kind of strengths seem a wee bit low, but no, the filling strength at the distillery is 63.5, which is pretty much standard across the industry. So 63.5 is the filling strength.
You know, and it's probably worth noting we have dunnage warehouses. So a lot of the casks are matured in these sort of dark, damp, earthy dunnage warehouses. We also have some racked warehouses as well. So not all the casks are stored in the same situation as well. So you might expect some sort of fluctuations in angel share with if you're in the top of a racked warehouse or at the bottom here in a damp earth floor.
It's interesting the warehouse we're in, because I can remember coming in here on some cold, frosty mornings, and sometimes you will see frost on top of the casks. Earlier on today, when I was setting up tasting, it was quite a nice day in Campbell. It was
Really
wild in here. I was sitting in here with a t-shirt on, and I think, I'll not need a jumper tonight. And here I am actually
Shivering away.
It's not too bad.
It's not too bad. So yeah, this warehouse, certainly the temperatures do fluctuate quite dramatically in this tasting.
There's a few folks saying thanks, David. That was a good recommendation. It's opening it up nicely, and they're enjoying their Madeira matured whiskey now.
It's always nice to experiment with having a wee splash of water. Just remember, you can't take the water back in.
That's it. When it's a one cell dry mead, you certainly don't want to drown it. So be careful. I don't know about you guys, but
Time to move on.
time for number 5.
It's like a speed taste.
It is a speed tasting, yeah.
We're aware that we've got a lot to get through. So after the 7th dram, we've actually decided we'll have a quick 10-minute break, just to sort of gather ourselves again, and move on to the next 7 whiskies. So we've got another 3 to go until the wee break.
No, so we're getting through it quite nicely, I think. Yeah. So whiskey number 5 is a Phenol wood, which was bottled. It was a cask that was split between 3 markets: the Netherlands, Poland, and Switzerland.
So 51.6, and there was 336 bottles on this one. The markets.
Yeah, so quite different immediately in the nose from the previous.
It does have those juicy sort of red apples.
I'm noticing as I'm going along, my glasses seem to be getting colder and colder. I think as the temperature's dropping. Try and warm up my hands here. Normally, when we do our physical malts festival in every May, it's an absolute scorcher. I've maybe just jinxed that touch wood, but the weather's not happening right now, is it?
No, it's been a really cold spring actually, in comparison to last year. Which was quite a blessing, because when we all went into lockdown, I think we were all quite grateful we were down here in Campbelltown, because the weather was scorching. We had weeks and weeks of dry, really warm days. And although we weren't really to be able to go too far from home, being in quite a rural community, it was nice to be able to get out a little bit.
There's certainly no excuses not to get the work done in the garden.
Yeah. We all had tans for a change.
Yeah, it makes a change not having to get up early and drive your sort of 3 hours up to the airport and then fly to wherever, and the sort of constant state of being sort of jet lagged or tired.
3 hours drive, that's an easy one for you.
I know Grant's usually the one that's travelling in the car all over the UK, and the rest of us get to jet off from Glasgow mostly. So
I don't mind driving.
Yeah, I was going to say you can fly to other parts of the UK, don't necessarily need to.
It's easier, just load in the car with all the stock I require.
Absolutely.
So you can take all the bottles. Yeah.
That's it.
So you're quite lucky here in the UK.
I think we've just set you up for a potential future carjacking there. Everybody knows you carry your stock around with you now.
That's all right.
But it will be nice to get back to something normal, to get to meet people again.
And that's the thing, people are asking, when will we be back on the road? And, well, safe and well, literally is what we're saying.
Are any of you planning on going to any whisky festivals, or everyone kind of staying home and keeping quiet until things are totally opened up? It'd be quite interesting. I don't really know how eager everyone is to get back to that normality.
Yeah, I think from our side of things, it's we love to go and travel and meet people and tell our story, and it's a great story to tell. But at the same time, 8 hours behind the stand at a whiskey festival is hard going. But funnily enough, I never thought I'd say I kind of miss those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I must admit, I've not been to the Campbelltown Malts Festival yet. I've done plenty of Fay Sheilas, but the Campbelltown Malts Festival I was really excited to be part of, and then obviously this lockdown happened, so yeah, I'm looking forward to when we can open up again. Whether that'll be 2022 or 2023, who knows at the moment, but we're looking forward to being able to welcome everyone back, to be here with us.
That's the thing, because if we are telling the story, the fact we do, everyone's done it in Campbelltown, it's all about local produce, etc. We want to physically get people down here and see the distillery. Because it is an old-fashioned way of making whiskey, and seeing the comparisons in Springbank and Glengyle, and it's not a made-up story. The story is factual, and it fits the product as well.
How you guys find it? I'm finding lots of sort of raisins and prunes.
More earthy, ashy. We've got some folk looking forward to Belfast Whisky Week. And Tilson was wondering how many tasting packs were actually produced. So this is maybe something that's quite good to talk about actually, because they sold out very quickly. But this one particularly, we always knew was going to be a very limited opportunity because we only had 2 bottles of each in the set to be able to work with for a tasting. And so it's quite a different ballgame really. Those were set aside for the physical malts festival back in 2020, 2020, yeah. So that would probably have been, a fairly regular tasting. It would have been a capacity of up to about 130, 135 people, something like that. Because you only have 2 bottles and you want to sort of share it out as much as possible. So because it was originally planned for that physical festival and not for an online tasting where obviously it opens up to being able to be purchased by so many more people, that it sold out really very quickly, as expected. But with the other tastings that we've done this week, we produced a lot more.
Yeah, that's the sort of benefits of doing something like that. You can sort of scale up to try and meet worldwide demand. There's lots of you that would love to come to Campbelltown for the physical festival, but can't for various reasons, holidays or travel costs, everything like that. So this is a great way to sort of invite as many people as we could into these sort of tastings. But the Kilkerran tasting, just by its nature, isn't something that could be scaled up. So I think it makes it all very more sort of sought after and limited.
Yeah, I'm getting the same as James on the chat, more of that sort of long char kind of finish, which is really nice.
Yeah, I think it's great to try all these side by side, and they all have that sort of Kilkerran trait with the influence of the cask doing something interesting, which is kind of what you want when you do a single cask. You don't want necessarily just to showcase exactly what the core range showcases. You want to sort of add something interesting, a twist on it, and I think the Phenol cask does that very well.
And there's lots of people reminiscing about festivals gone by, making me jealous.
We can write a book.
I know. It's quite nice to read all your comments. Curry sauce, highly recommended.
It's brilliant seeing everybody come here and in our hometown and seeing what we have to offer. Hopefully we'll get that back to some normality again for that.
Absolutely. I've kept a little bit of that Phenol in my glass there because dram number 6 is also a Phenol wood and it was bottled for China. So I'm going to try and do a side-by-side comparison. Try not to mix my glasses up.
I don't drink them either.
So very similar, obviously same casks style, and the ABV is just slightly more at 52%.
And this was bottled for the Chinese market.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But you now look after Nicole, so you're anxious to get over.
Yeah, I know. I've not been to China. Well, I've only touched down in China for a very short period to go somewhere else back in my travelling days. But yeah, it'll be fab to go out and visit them. They've been taking part in a really big international sort of food and drink expo this week. So yeah, things are seem to be back to normal really over there, and they're doing a lot with the whiskies this week. So it's really exciting.
Yeah.
Wish we were there.
Interesting one is only 198 bottles from this one.
It's a smaller cask.
Smaller cask, yeah.
I think whereas before I thought it was more of a sort of raisin and earthiness, it's slightly more sort of smoother milk chocolate type note to it, and cocoa, and there's a sort of a bitterness, like sort of a espresso, sort of coffee bean sort of bitterness in the finish as well. Lovely.
There's a spicy note there too as well. Cinnamon or something.
Yeah, cinnamon. Poached pears.
Yeah, and I think one of the greatest things about Kilkerran is it was designed to be a Campbelltown malt, and it has that sort of robust complex, that oiliness, that sort of maritime note to it. And I'm sure when they were designing the stills and getting things going in the early part of the millennium, there might have been an aspect to say produce a very sort of lighter, sort of
more floral,
sort of fruitier, maybe might have a bit more mass market appeal. But I'm very much glad we stuck to our Campbelltown guns and produced a whiskey which is a true caricature of a Campbelltown single malt. I think does it very well.
One thing as well, look at it, we've done it for many years with Springbank, and we know what the market wants and how it works. And then using obviously Frank McCarthy's knowledge and experience as well, altering the still slightly to produce a lighter, fruitier style spirit, long fermentation process. It certainly complements what we have to offer.
And you really want to stay true to your roots, don't you? You want to produce something that sort of, when you're drinking it, you really know you're drinking a Campbelltown malt, or you're drinking more specifically a Kilkerran whisky.
Exactly.
So you want to have that stamp or the sort of signature style in your whiskies.
People do ask what similarities, or what do you reckon, what style is Kilkerran? And you think, well, it has its unique style, that salty, maritime, a little bit of peat smoke in the background. It has its true regional status.
That's it. As an independent company, we're not making it a single malt, which is designed to go into a sort of a bigger part of a blend or something like that. So we have the freedom to even do these experiments, whether it's heavily peated or triple distilled as well.
Would our records have shown? Someone's asking. Obviously, there's 3 different Phenol matured whiskies in this tasting, but would all of those Phenol casks, those 3 Phenol casks, have come from the same winery? Probably, likely.
From the same producer, absolutely. Yeah,
Yes.
it's pretty much guaranteed. I think. Yeah, I'd expect so.
But it just shows you, if you're finding that there's differences between each of these drams, which I'm sure we all are, the effect. These casks can come from the same sherry producer, and each individual cask has makes its own mark on the spirit and has its own character. So it also sort of illustrates why vatted malts are essential, because if we were selecting single casks all the time to produce whiskies, you can just see how different each can be, even if they are from the same producer, same size, same type of sherry, etc. How different whiskies matured inside can be.
Yeah, I think you look at it in so much detail. You can even go into you could have the same sort of whiskey going into the same sort of, even a bourbon cask or something in the same part of the warehouse, same maturation time, that we can be quite different because maybe the wood from one has come from a sort of deeper, darker part of the forest or something, and the sort of tannin content is different to the other one. There's so many sort of variations when it comes to the wood.
And a lot of people are finding that the number 5, which
Number 5,
was
the first Phenol.
the Phenol, and a lot of love as well for the number 6, which was for the Chinese market.
So we also thought, doing 1CL, is it enough to get the influence on each dram? And I think doing a tasting like this, it is, because people say, oh, why are you not doing 2CL? Well, obviously the number of packs was one reason, but if we're doing a tasting, 13, 14 drams, 1CL is enough towards the taste and get the flavours coming through from each dram.
If we're doing 2CL, I'd be asleep here by now.
Did we mention that this number 6 was for the Belgian market?
In China.
In China, yeah.
We're on numbers.
Oh, right, yeah.
Yeah. So are we going on to number 7 and then having a break? Breaks after number 7?
Number 7, after number 7.
Cool, so let's find number 7. Actually, that makes sense because I've got 7 glasses here. That's what we've done.
There's a reason behind the maths.
I'm not sure how you all find it at home, but even we were struggling to get the 14 glasses on our table here.
We want to know how many people are working with 14 glasses.
I had some folk messaging on Instagram earlier just saying, just about managed to not use the pint glasses tonight.
So you can never have enough whiskey glasses. And see, we've got out our finest sort of China ones there, the sort of bigger ones, not the little kind of sort of stubby ones we sometimes use. Quite right. So number 7 is the third Phenol wood in this, and this was bottled exclusively for Belgium.
Yep, 52.1% alcohol, and there was 222 bottles from this cask.
And you missed your time in Belgium this year, didn't you? Spirits in the Sky.
Spirits in the Sky, yes.
That's got a special place in the heart.
Don't worry, I shall be back. Shall be back. We do love a good whiskey show. We do love a good after party as well. And Spirits in the Sky is infamous for its after party. I don't know about you, but I find this more sort of fruitier.
It's more refined.
Yeah, sort of more
It's
delicate.
unless it's a wee bit warmed up. But,
Fantastic. Has anybody been on the comments and saying they've managed to sort of track down 10 of the bottles or anything like that?
Not as far as I've seen, no.
All been quite elusive so far.
Yeah, I don't think there's
one of my customers in the UK certainly had a good go at it in a tasting form last year.
Yeah, this is where you need
How
your.
many did you have in that tasting? Was it
7 like that?
7?
That's a good go at it. This is where you need your sort of worldwide network of whiskey friends in all these countries to source bottles and share whiskey.
Yeah, a lot of people are glad for the. Some people are saying they're glad for the break. They'll be able to wash their glasses and start again afterwards, which is exactly what we thought.
Who's doing the dishes? Even the nose is, I'm not saying closed nose, but certainly the palate is just wow. It's just
Yeah, it's a very big palate. Quite goes very sort of dark, very rich.
Dark and rich, gingerbread, kind of
Yeah,
sticky
exactly. Yeah.
gingerbread.
I don't know if it's because I was eating Jamaican ginger cake yesterday, but it's a lot of that sort of, sort of
So
sticky.
was I had a nice bit of that Argyle Bakery's gingerbread or ginger cake yesterday.
Oh yeah, keeping it local.
Oh, it's so good. And it is like that. It's really sticky and kind of really.
Yeah.
they sort of marzipan note there too as well.
Very smooth, very nice sort of silky mouthfeel. I meant to add water to that, but I drank it before I got the opportunity to.
I'll tell you how it is.
That was lovely, yeah. I can't quite make up my mind on which one I thought was the best out of those three. They're all sort of slightly different and in their own way, but all very good in their own way as well.
That's one thing with doing the tasting as well, because a lot of people, is there much difference between the three Phenol sherry casks? Like, well, doing this tasting and knowing from experience, trying them all, yes, there is.
Absolutely. So I'm glad we've got a bit of a break to sort of reset the palate, get some sort of crackers and oatcakes or something there, just to sort of cleanse the palate, drink water and start again.
So yeah, well, have a quick 10-minute break?
Yeah, 10 minutes.
10-minute break and see you then. Cheers.
Yes, cheers guys. See you in 10.
There you go.
Yeah, welcome back, everyone. Hope you've managed to refresh yourself, your glasses, and I think we're ready to jump straight into dram number 8, which is the portwood, or the first of 3 portwoods at 51.2%.
Yeah, so this one was bottled for Denmark, and there was 192 bottles from this one.
Now, I remember the port cask we had at the back of the warehouse here, and there was that feeling that they were getting too porty, as fine as it sounds after a while, and the feeling that putting them back into bourbon was
It was a
definitely
good choice, yeah. And certainly for many of us who visit the distillery and came in here and tried the port cask up the back in the Warehouse 3, it has a lot of port influence. And to me, putting it back into the bourbon for 5 years has brought out more of the true distillery characteristics, because it was getting, for my liking, about too port.
You can see the difference in the colour in the first, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's really melted.
can see
It's
it.
lovely.
It's nice and juicy. It's like making me salivate even smelling it.
So the overriding sort of tasting note that's popping out for me is cola cubes. You know, those little sort of 1p sweets, the cola cubes. I don't know if you're watching this outside the UK, you probably no idea what a cola cube is. So apologies for that. But these little cola flavoured sweets that kind of coated in sort of sugar and stuff, and yeah, lovely. They sort of start off hard and something you go chewy.
Yeah. I remember doing a tasting years ago, and somebody mentioned cola cubes, and we're all like, cola cubes, and sitting there drinking the whiskey, like, and somebody ran round to the local shop and bought a quarter of cola cubes, and we all sat there and compared it.
We had a chap from Taiwan do the whiskey school here, and I think he was infuriated about our taste notes, how we kept referring to these sort of Scottish sweeties.
Yeah.
So before he went back to Taiwan, he went down to the sweet shop and bought loads of these sweets so he could share them at taste and say, this is what they're talking about when they say an iron brew bar or a cola cube thing.
Or wine gums.
Exactly.
I've had one of the markets ask, what is a wine gum?
Maybe we need to start sending out sort of 20p mixes
Yeah.
out of our bottles when we do these tastings.
I mean, there's a great sweetie mix shop in Campbellton,
Yeah,
which is really popular.
I'm all ready for a 20p mix now. Yeah, I think
Yeah, on the palate, certainly lovely rich flavours to it.
again, I am very sort of elegant and smooth in the mouthfeel, very sort of gentle, no hint at all of the higher strength. I find the finish is quite long.
It's got, okay, port's got a kind of winey note to it. There is that dark winey note to it on the nose and the palate.
Yeah, especially get the sort of tannins coming through.
Yeah.
So if my memory serves me correct, this was a port pipe into refill bourbon hogshead, whereas the previous ones have been sort of puncheons. All the previous drams were from puncheon casks into refill bourbon. This is a port pipe as well. Give this sort of cloves, licorice, those sort of flavours.
There's a dark fruit note there to it. There is.
Oh, lovely. And again, exactly kind of what we want to demonstrate with a single cask and a different type of wood. It's just something different to the sort of the core range. I think this does it very well.
And our core range currently consists of the Kilkerran 12-year-old. That was the first core product, which I think was planned right from the beginning, wasn't it?
Yeah, we always wanted 12-year-olds to 12-year-old market,
and obviously in 2020 we released the first 16-year-old, which is part of the core range as well, and more bourbon-focused whisky, whereas the 12-year-olds got a bit of bourbon and the sherry. And I mean, not that we can maybe give away what we're planning for the future, but we've maybe got some indicators of what the next, and people are wondering what the next age statement, are we continuing this age statement sort of theme, will the next be a 20, a 21-year-old, a 25? So what are our future plans for the distillery?
I think, well, there's future plans that we make, and then we change quite frequently.
Yeah,
So I
never
think so,
guarantee,
yeah. So,
you know, to get a face
you know,
value.
people think we're keeping our cards close to our chest for various reasons, but really it's because what we might plan is happening in 5 years might change in the next 6 months or something like that. So
I suppose that's one of the main benefits of being independent. You have that sort of ownership over what happens and when it happens, and you can kind of go with the flow and make those changes.
Exactly.
That was
tied
fine.
to any.
Even when we brought out the 12-year-old, we only had so much of it for on the market, and it was so popular. We knew it was going to be popular as a first release, etc. But it was so greatly received. We had to go back and look at the stock figures to try and get more on the market, just to cope with demand for it. And of course, doing that has a knock-on effect for future releases, etc.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a significant thing, is that there's not necessarily, if you've got a core product, your flagship, our flagship is our 12-year-old, you want to have that sort of relatively ubiquitous in the markets that we're relevant in, by bringing out other whiskies, other age statements, you might be taken away from that stock and sort of spreading yourself too thinly. So I think for us, we've got an outstanding flagship, the 12-year-old.
Yeah.
And it's important that we sort of try and keep that present everywhere we can, really.
And that's, again, we found that with the release of the 16-year-old, it's quite interesting to say that you sort of had the same thing with the 12. The 16-year-old first edition sold out really quickly and everybody was thirsty for more, but I suppose that this year we're kind of hoping to have a bit more of that and whatnot to kind of meet a bit more of the demand within these.
It's interesting as when you're talking about core products, sometimes, yes, they might not be available in the market, and that's happened with a 12-year-old, and now it's happening with a 16-year-old.
Yeah.
But yeah, stock levels are slowly increasing.
As is the demand, isn't it? I suppose it's one of the first. You've got to be a very patient person in our business. The demand is here on our doorstep right now, but we're quite happy to sort of stick to our guns and produce age statements. And, in theory, you could say, well, we'll take away these age statements and bring out younger whiskey. But I think we're quite happy to do what we do and have that age statement factor there.
It'd be interesting to see how Kilkerran matures on, because we all know it works. Every release so far has worked at a young age, doing the 12-year-old, doing the 16-year-old. It'd be interesting to see how it matures on to do, say, a 20 or 25, whatever age expression we do for older ones.
Yeah, for me, I think not just in Kilkerran or Springline, but most whiskey, I think it's at its best. I prefer it when it's a slightly younger age, maybe sort of between 10, 12, 15 years old. So it's more bigger, robust, sort of complex. The longer it's spent in the cask, it gets more sort of mellow, elegant. And softer. And I like those sort of big, bold
I think I would
flavours.
probably agree with that,
So if we're all agreed, we'll just stick to a 12 and a 16-year-old then.
Sounds good to me, yeah. I'm sure Finlay will be happy with that as well.
I've just poured the next quote with number 9, which is bottled for Germany there.
Yeah, so this one here, 51.5% alcohol, and there was 246 bottled from it.
It's instant in the nose. I feel it's sort of different from the.
So different.
Yeah.
As soon as I picked up the glass of it, wow.
It's more, isn't it?
So all of these bottles, bar the sort of ones that we kept for their archive for events such as this, would have been sold in the German market. So you would have had to buy them from our distributor there.
I say it's sweet, but very much that cola cube influence. Now, because I've said it, it's all I can sort of think about. But well, that kind of sort of chocolate and strawberry.
So different to the palate, the nose, and then you go into the palate. Wow, it's a big difference.
It's really soft in the nose, isn't it? It's quite delicate, gentle.
Interesting one as well when we doing different products throughout the years. I can remember, obviously, being in the company when the distillery, the first spirit ran off the stills, and then we had a big party when the distillery turned 3 years old, and we opened a single cask that day, so a 3-year-old whiskey, and everybody was commenting how mature and complex it was for such a young whiskey. It did get us thinking, why don't we do, well, came to the work in progress series, where we've done the 5-year-old on, as we progressed up to releasing a 12-year-old, and that's built a brand for it as well. We've got a name behind it. It was interesting to see how it matures on.
When you make such a good quality spirit, obviously Mr. McCarty and the whole, he was quite integral to that, but the plan behind producing Kilkerran was to make a sort of certain real character of spirit, which was light, and we talked about fruity, sweet, floral in a way as well. And the stills were designed specifically in order to make that style of spirit, which lends itself maybe as well to these younger. I mean, if the spirit quality is that high, it doesn't really necessarily need longer lengths of time in the cask to be exceptional.
You're 100% right, and I think you see that with the heavily peated series that we do. The first batch is essentially 3-year-old whiskey. Stunning, it's fantastic. And then,
amazing.
Many people thought we were crazy to do such a young whiskey at a cask strength, but we thought it worked well. And if we were doing this sort of Peat in Progress series as a sort of something for people to be involved with, we wanted to showcase the whiskey in its purest sort of natural form and give it to them in the this cask strength format, and it's worked really well.
I remember us tasting the batch 3 because it was the first sort of tasting that we did at home when we were all in lockdown, and we were just about to release the batch 3, and then we went into lockdown, so we had to actually recall it. We were like, hold on, it's not going to be released as we planned. But we did do the tasting notes from home, and I remember us all kind of tasting it and thinking, wow, this is really good, and remarking on, if it tastes this good at such a young age, that's like spot on. Long may it continue. And I think, we're going to finish the night with the heavily peated edition and tell you a bit more about some that are upcoming, but it tastes, as we remarked when doing the tasting notes in the more recent one, beyond its years. Doesn't taste necessarily as young as it is.
It's got that maturity, complexity to it, and it's all about quality behind it.
As this is warming up in my glass, sort of opening up a bit, I think I'll add a tiny wee bit of water just for the last bit, but get more of the sort of kind of red apple, toffee.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are liking the ports at home.
So I remember fairly recently ago, I done a tasting that included the 10-year-old set tasting. I can remember coming to the port, and it was really heavy port influence to it. But now trying these, it's like a wee step back to it, and get more of that distillery characteristic coming through.
That's lovely to see. Red fruits, nice and.
We're going to jump on to number 10 now. And then this will complete the ports. Yeah.
So this one was bottled for Italy, Beja Flor in Italy. Ooh.
Yeah, so this one here, 51.8% alcohol and 144 bottles.
No. So it's sort of funny trying 3 ports in a row. Yeah, porty.
Yeah.
I think this one, set in the glass is freezing, so.
Are you finding at home it's probably your glasses and your rooms are a bit warmer than they are here, and your glands are probably opening up a bit?
You mean they're drinking their whiskey at room temperature instead of freezing cold warehouse in Campbelltown temperature?
Are you finding subtle differences or big differences between the drams? What are you thinking?
I think it's quite soft. Sort of more of a delicate nose in the
Definitely in the nose and the palate. It's certainly that poor winey note coming through.
And the ppm of our regular Kilkerran whiskies, so that includes Kilkerran 12, 16, and all of these whiskies here, is about 10 to 15 ppm.
Yeah.
So lightly peated.
And that's what we measure the the malt after it comes off the kiln at. So by the time it's gone through the production process, the fermentation, the distillation, it's probably about a third of that by the time it's in your glass. So it's a very, very subtle influence.
Yeah.
We all say it's in the background, the aftertaste, and that's what we want.
Yeah, it's part of the fabric, the DNA of the whiskey, but not a sort of overriding sort of profile.
Until we try the last one. That was the comparison they were making, but we'll wait. We'll trace the last one, and then we'll talk about the ppm of the heavily peated. So about 10 to 12 for these.
Isn't it really kind of juicy?
I was thinking they're even more kind of woody notes coming through in this one.
Yeah, and certainly in the finish for me, it is. Yeah.
In a nice way.
Mm-hmm. It's got sort of red currants, pencil shavings. It's almost a kind of sort of leather, in a kind of leather bound book in an old library or something like that. And I'm about to say this kind of earthy dunnage, but it could just be I'm smelling the atmosphere in here.
Atmosphere you're in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. Hopefully everybody knows what a bung cloth is, but if not, there's a bit of bung cloth there.
So it's like it's Hessian.
Yeah.
So Hessian cloth, which is put into each of the casks to stop them leaking.
Yeah, it helps seal the bung, create a seal around the bung. Is everybody at home sort of following our progress, or has anybody sort of got to the end already?
Moved on to the next round.
Yeah, a lot of people are saying, the colour in these, obviously it's a bit darker in here as well, but you can see, you can clearly see when the drams are poured that these three are matured in port casks, because it does have that nice red hue.
Yeah, as soon as you hold it up to the light, you can see that reddish tinge to it.
Yeah, I'm saying it's like it could possibly be a rosy in the glass. Like a rosy wine colour.
And you see the legs of it, it's a lovely oily sort of character.
And other people mentioning that sort of dusty note, which again I think is that dunnage bung cloth kind of
characteristic style.
Which is like you say, because all of the whiskies here produced at our distilleries, which include Glengyle Distillery, which is the home of Kilkerran single malt, and Springbank, which produces Springbank, Hazelburn, and Longgrove whiskies. They're matured entirely in Campbelltown, which is, it's quite something to behold, really. That all of our whiskies are matured here in the town, and I think that also lends itself to a certain characteristic. We get these maritime characteristics coming through in the whisky, sometimes a slight salty or harbour side note, which it does come up time and time again in all of our tasting notes when we have the pleasure of tasting every whisky that's released to the market before it is, and we make these notes. That's a prominent one.
I think you can sort of see the warehouse it was sitting in is quite open, drafty. The weather in Campbelltown, when it rains, the rain doesn't come from up there; it comes from the side. It really does, and it sort of gets in there for that sort of saltiness, that maritime influence. Absolutely.
And if you're here as well, you can see the walls are covered in mould, and that all contributes to a sort of flavour profile. In some of our warehouses more than others.
Yeah, we're always limited. If we want to mature bottles in Campbelltown, what space we've got. I'm sure everybody in Campbelltown will say, well, I'll mature a cask for you in your back garden, etc., in your shed. but we are limited, and that's why we're kind of looking at it, a portfolio, and a plan of future. Okay, how can we expand? And one of the things we had to look at was warehousing space. And so over the last couple of years, there has been a new warehouse getting built.
Developed a big warehouse, haven't they?
Yeah, I know, which is something that we haven't really actually talked about all that much. I mean, we've always said, you know, we'll put it in our socials and things like that. We haven't yet, but we will soon kind of show you the new warehouse that's been built, which has been called warehouse number 8.
I think that's right, yeah.
Because it's in between, you know, probably there would have been warehouses there before, I'm sure, and it's in between number 9 and 7. So
it makes sense.
Makes sense to call it number 8.
But for those who have been in Campbelltown,
I thought you were going to say like completely different numbers there.
So why is warehouse 15 at the top of the lane? Does that mean you've got 15 warehouses?
Oh. So yeah, we have built a nice big new racked warehouse, which, I mean, it does look completely different to the others that we have, because it's new. But that's given us a huge amount more space to be able to
doesn't yet have this kind of mould up the wall to it.
Yeah.
But we'll get there.
Okay, so people did ask that question, who people knew, oh, you put a new warehouse, are you going down the route of palletising? I said, no, it's racked warehouse. We want to try and keep some of the heritage behind the warehouse side of things as well.
And that's one of the things as well, I think, when people are always asking why don't we increase production, you know, there's a lot of things to consider in that, you know, like, you know, if you increase production and you dramatically start making more whiskey, where do you put it? If you want to be able to mature all the whiskies in Campbelltown, which I think is integral to what we do here, you need to be able to have the space to mature that whiskey as well.
So warehousing space was one of our limiting factors, and also bottling as well. So it is all bottled here. For those who have seen the bottling plant, and we have made kind of improvements there to try and get more whiskey bottles on the market quicker, but to try and keep the kind of hands-on approach to it as well.
Well, you guys were talking, I poured number 11, which is the Oloroso cask we did for the USA.
Yeah. So moving on to Oloroso.
Yeah.
Which is something that Oloroso and bourbon is our
that's our go-tos, really. So yeah, exactly.
Our maturation program sort of centers around bourbon and Oloroso.
Exactly. So, you know, the feedback we've received from the 8-year-old cask strength, which has been matured in Oloroso, has been pretty good. So, well, let's see what the feedback is tonight on a 15-year-old in Oloroso cask strength as well.
We've got a question as well, which is quite interesting and quite valid. And something I think, I'm not quite sure what the answer will be, but maybe David will be able to help us. It's not a super duper hard one, don't worry. It's not a...
Put you on your spot here, David.
Yeah, I'm not going to put you on the spot too much. Kevin was just wondering, you know, with the pandemic, we've been forced, I suppose, to adapt how we do things in distilleries. And, you know, the thought of doing tastings virtually on the computer was something that was quite alien to us in the beginning. I remember before we even left the office, before we were fully aware of this pandemic and how it was going to affect us, when it dawned on us, one of the first things that I remember saying to one of my colleagues was, you know, we need, or we talked about it, was we need to do virtual tastings, you know. This is something nobody's done before.
Talk to the computer for 2 hours.
And before we even had the chance to embark on
before
it,
the words were out your mouth,
they were popping up everywhere.
Yeah.
So, you know, we've really had to make changes and adapt with this situation. And, you know, it's not all been negative. I think that we've really had our eyes open to the opportunities. And it's shown us the benefits of staying at home and how we can learn to do things differently. So someone has said that they really are enjoying, I mean, online tastings are proving very, very popular and people are enjoying taking part of them in them at home. And is that something that we might embark on and continue going forward, as well as
I think definitely. We obviously, when it comes to something like a Campbelltown Malts Festival, we like to have lots of people here. Forklift, lots of people here, so people can enjoy the atmosphere of the distillery, but also the wider community. The town benefits from that. People tend to come now for the full week and stay in B&Bs and eat in the restaurants and stuff, and the whole town does very well out of it. So I think it's very important that we certainly do that. But at the same time, it's been quite fun, I think, to open up to a wider audience, to all corners of the globe, and do these tastings and scale up to that. So I think people have become accustomed to it as well, to do these tastings. So to continue, I think, is something we will be able to do.
Certainly for myself in the UK, I'll probably look at doing a mixture of both, because certainly, as much as we love going out and about talking to people face to face, there is that perception of people sitting back in their home comfort. If I'm sitting in Campbelltown doing it on speaking to my computer for 2 hours, why not? Demand's there for it, and it's spreading the words and communicating with people. Very beneficial for us.
Yeah, I think it's something we want to explore more with our society, Springbank Society as well. To engage more with society members and do these as well. So certainly there.
Which was something that we had in fact discussed before all of this as well.
But I think that involved doing up an old ice cream van and touring around Europe.
We're on eBay like ice cream vans.
We'll put this on the burner just now, but we'll revisit that as well.
Kilkerran on tour.
So I mean, it is, and it's interesting to think about, because it has allowed us to, really invite people from all corners of the globe. And there's people saying in the chat that they've been maybe before, but they can't afford or they can't justify making the trip all the way to Campbelltown every year. So it's something. It's quite baffling that we didn't really, think about these things.
We know living here in Campbelltown.
It's given such an
not
opportunity.
the easiest place to get to.
Yeah,
It's not. We always say it's so beneficial. If you make that effort to come to visit us here in Campbelltown, we want to make sure you go away saying, "Wow, what a place to visit!" And I think we do it very well.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's getting that mixture of both worlds.
I suppose not many people knew what Zoom was. That the technology even existed to do that kind of broad, sort of audience reaching tasting.
See, I can certainly see. I think going forward, I'm sure we all agree, we'll probably build in a bit of both, because you can't replace the physical either. It's not quite the same. Being here in the environment, soaking up the atmosphere, having a good dance, all these things is what I like. I love.
You've heard
that.
too many stories about our open days.
So I hope you dance at the open day. I've not been yet. I'm expecting a dance. So you can't replace that really, but a bit of both is certainly something that I think should be implemented going forward.
What was your thoughts on this one, Dave? Because to me, it went down very, very easily. 300 bottles of this one, but it was beautiful in the palate, but it was so easy to drink. You've got lovely fruity, rich oloroso characteristics. It's noticing the cask type it's matured in, but it was so drinkable.
I think you're right. It kind of gives you the best of Kilkerran and the oloroso characteristics. My sort of general tendency for anything is, I think, like most of us, we kind of in the sales team anyway, quite like these sort of bourbon rum matured whiskies, but even the sort of darker sides of things with the oloroso, sort of the marzipan, the sort of dark chocolate, sort of cherry notes are Christmas cake, the sort of spiciness, everything that's in there. It's fantastic, and it's a very, very layered whiskey. There's lots of different things to sort of unpick and unravel about it.
How did this go down in the US market?
Pretty well, I guess. I guess. I assume, like everywhere, it's sort of sold out. It's just, unfortunately, that's the thing with single cask. It's just not
enough. It's like a drop in the ocean.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah.
does it supply the market? Does it tease the market?
Frustrate everyone.
Frustrate the market.
Gets us lots of hate mail.
We've got a helpline.
Which is Nicole at Society at Springbank.
I think quite interesting to compare that now with the Japanese Oloroso cask. Poured out. Yeah, these glasses are definitely getting colder as we go along.
So 276 bottles in this one at 52%.
Yeah, for me it's instantly a sort of different nose. It's much sort of softer and open.
Yeah.
And you get this sort of overripe plums almost. Yeah, really sort of overripe fruit.
Definitely, yeah. Does this go back to the conversation we had about every cask being unique? Yes, the Oloroso, the port, but trying these three Oloroso side by side, you're like, wow, these three different whiskies.
People are enjoying now that we're on the Oloroso maturations, something that's proved really popular as an annual release is the Kilkerran 8-year-old cask strength, which has been matured solely in Oloroso casks.
Yeah. The first editions of the 8-year-old were in bourbon, and sort of laterally they've been in the sherry, and so difficult to judge. Uptake in Kilkerran, demand for Kilkerran has already kind of sort of jumped massively, and I think putting something into sherry, you get all the sort of sherry sort of freaks jumping into that as well.
Yeah.
So it's sort of got both your Kilkerran sort of fans and your sherry
It
freaks.
fits the portfolio we're looking at. We're doing the 12-year-old with a mixture of bourbon and sherry, and then doing the 16, which is mostly bourbon. Fitting a Kilkerran matured in sherry, an 8-year-old cask strength does fit the portfolio we're putting on the market. Because there is a fan base there. People love bourbon, ones that love sherry, and then we've got these weird and wonderful cask types. So, of course, single cask releases for open days and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yep. The 8-year-old's been I would say, one of my favourite additions to try. When I joined at first, it was the.
What you said this morning? He just he thought it was remarkable how better the whiskey in Campbelltown was than on Ireland.
I don't think I even said that.
Nicole being from Ireland, obviously.
No, but I mean the whiskies are amazing, but they do have a sort of different. I mean, you can tell that having been accustomed more to drinking Islay whiskies and then coming here, there's a real signature style, but they are very differentiable.
Absolutely,
There's a style on Islay and there's a style here, which is great. I mean, that's what you want, and you want to be able to drink something and know what you're drinking, and you don't want to drink the same thing all the time, So I mean,
just drink the locality.
Yeah, and you want to be able to taste kind of. You want to have a sense of the place, I suppose. And I mean, the 8-year-old for me has been. I think I selected this as my lockdown dram back in March 2020, but it was the sherry edition. And then when we did the tasting back in October, Cara introduced me to the bourbon at 56. I think it was 56.5%, which had been released before I joined the team, and it blew me away as well. So the 8-year-olds for me are a kind of sweet spot. I really love them.
I think it comes back to there's absolutely nothing wrong with young whiskey. If it's good, bottle it. And I'm quite proud of the fact that we put our age statement on when we first did the 8-year-old. People sort of raised an eyebrow and thought, again, it's a young age statement at cask strength. I don't think the market's kind of up for that, but we quite like this sort of transparency. And if we want to give you as much information as we can.
And we're all about age statements, I would say. This distillery and Springbank, it's all about age statements. There's really not.
There's openly talk about it during tastings, etc. Some of the products might not have the age statement on. label, but we are openly talking about what goes into it.
I think as the wider industry started sort of withdrawing age statements and bringing out non-age statements to try and keep up with demand, using a bit of younger whiskey to sort of bolster volumes. Typical us went against grain of the wood and sort of put age statements and everything, and we're quite happy with that. And if we sell it of everything, it can be a bit frustrating, but we're quite happy to have that sort of transparency.
So that's obviously not a full maturation like the 8-year-old was, but 10 years in bourbon, 5 years in sherry Oloroso cask.
10 years in
10 years in Oloroso, 5 years in bourbon. I'm in the sherry zone for friends.
So let's move on to number 13. Unlucky for some. So this is the Oloroso, which is bottled for France.
Unlucky for everyone but France.
Exactly.
Yeah, so 52.6% alcohol, 246 bottles from this cask. So I'll just try and warm up the glass.
Again, it's different on the nose.
Definitely, yeah.
And it's darker. I'm going to have a little sip, so neat, and then add some water to it.
You get much more dark fruits as you expect. That Christmas cake, marzipan, sultanas, dates, raisins.
There's people asking for plans to switch up the maturation from the sherry and 8-year-old, but perhaps you don't know that we did bourbon before, and I don't know if there's any plans to change it up again in the future. If that's a...
No, I mean, nothing is ever written in stone with us, so 8-year-old might be sherry now for the next couple of years, but it could easily be back to bourbon. So I think that's part of the attraction to Springbank and Kilkerran, is that we can be quite loose and sort of change things up pretty quickly.
Certainly people do talk about the fact we do, even might have a core product where the large variation from year to year, and that is, people love that and looking forward to what cask types are you using this year and what's a slight difference from like last year's batch. And it adds to the excitement and the appeal to it.
And the reason core products can be slightly different is because you're using the best of the casks available to you at the time.
Yeah, especially with our older expressions, you don't have that massive pool of casks to use, so you've got to be sort of quite selective, and you can't just say this is going to be a defined amount of bourbon, a defined amount of sherry every year. You've got to, there's no point doing that if what you have in sherry isn't kind of what you want it to be. So we're quite happy to sort of change the recipe from year to year if it needs to be. It's all about the end product at the end of the day.
Yeah, people are liking the variations in batches.
Yeah, I think it's very, very well received. I think France are very lucky getting this cask.
I was actually just thinking about France there, because I think I wonder if there's anybody from France watching tonight, because I'm pretty sure we couldn't ship to France because of new Brexit regulations. So if anybody from France managed to get a pack and is with us tonight, let us know.
We've got a question from Ronan. Hi, Ronan.
The
Ronan.
Have you heard of Ronan before? He's asking if we think the Kilkerran spirit suits more an Oloroso maturation, or if it does quite well in Pedro Emine's casks.
PX. Try that next.
Have we done?
Yeah, I don't think we have any Kilkerran in PX, but for me, as a personal preference, I quite like the spirit in a lighter cask style, whether it's bourbon, rum, even Oloroso. I probably have a preference for sort of second fill Oloroso rather than fresh, and I think PX, it'd be quite interesting to put something maybe like heavily peated into the PX just to see how it stands up against it, and a sort of big, bold sort of spirit profile into that sort of cask type. Maybe, who knows? It's maybe one for the future. We certainly have some PX casks in our warehouses. So
It'd be interesting to try. One for Finlay.
Mm-hmm.
Have you tried it with water yet?
Yeah, I put a bit of water into it. Out of necessity, I think. 13 grams in, needing to stay hydrated. Again, it's different to the previous two. And the aftertaste is sort of the palate and the finish is certainly different, very much different. Sort of a lighter.
Like certainly with water, it does mellow it down a bit. You've got that lovely dark tropical fruits, kind of Christmas cake note there to it, but certainly with a wee splash of water, it just makes it so drinkable. Very moreish.
There's a sort of a curious note I can't quite place. That's very different from the previous two. And I find myself almost chewing it as well.
It's funny when you talk about whiskey and tasting notes, and people do describe it's quite chewy. And like, how is a whiskey chewy?
Yeah.
But you can just see people's mouth reaction when they're trying it. Like, that's chewy. You feel like you see the mouth going as if they're eating something. That's quite chewy.
And depending on where you are, it can be different from when you taste it one time to the next.
Yeah, absolutely. I also, you can drink a whiskey in a warehouse here in Campbelltown in the sort of coldest day of the year. But if it's your first time to the distillery and you're with your group of friends, and this has been your pilgrimage, the whiskey guaranteed from the cask, even though it's sort of cold, it's going to be the best whiskey you've ever tasted. Just because I think part of the atmosphere and the occasion, absolutely.
It's all about like the moment.
The moment.
Yeah.
I think there's a few people wishing they were in the warehouse tonight. And we were complaining that it was cold. They were like, we would rather be in the warehouse.
You better remember to lock up on the way out.
There's a few good casks lying in here. What else can we find in here later on for the after party?
Sasheen says this is a lip smacker.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
And it's, that's 13 drams I just tried for doing the 15-year-old anniversary tasting. I'm sure you'll all agree everyone was notably different. And that was one of the things we thought about when we were doing this tasting. Are they going to be very sameish? It's like, okay, it's another port, it's another Oloroso sherry. But no, they were all notably different. And that's the great thing about doing cask tasting, etc. I hope you all enjoyed the last 13 drams.
Yeah.
So I guess we're moving on to the last dram now, which is we couldn't have a Kilkerran tasting during the online tasting week and not have the festival bottling, so we've included that. And then not just because we're superstitious and couldn't end up in the 13.
And 13 drams wasn't enough.
Yeah. So we've got our heavily peated. This is 5-year-olds. This is from the original distillation, and it's matured exclusively in Oloroso.
Yeah, I mean on the nose it's completely different.
Yeah. So there's a few casks married together for this one here. So obviously demand, etc. We put several casks to get 1,303 bottles.
Yeah.
Wow, it's very sort of fudge. It's beautiful. The most striking thing is the peat. I was just going to say that there was more sort of fudge rather than a sort of heavily peated influence.
This is the thing
first aroma.
When you're smelling it, it's not a big peat hit. It's when you taste it and the finish and that's when the peat really builds.
For me, it's
the
aftertaste is all. It's like a magic trick. You'll sort of nose it in the mouth, swallow it, and then a second later it sort of whooshes back up.
But you really don't get a sense of that.
It's a perfect balance, and it works really well together because some peaty whiskey, it's peat smoke is all you get from start to finish. With this one here, you get the peat smoke, but then you get the distillery Campbelltown regional characteristics coming through. And even for this one here with the Oloroso, it all works really well together.
Yeah. That's a fantastic formulation. It almost feels like you're sort of blowing the smoke.
Yeah.
It just goes on and on and on and on.
Yeah, so hopefully many people manage to purchase a bottle of this one here and get it open and drunk, shared with friends.
Exactly.
It's interesting one
Someone's
way.
got our tasting note that we often pick out as well, Werther's Original.
Oh, yeah,
We say that
absolutely,
quite a lot.
yeah. Which again, if you're maybe watching from Taiwan or somewhere else, you won't have
Not sure
an
that
idea
is,
of what
but
we're talking about.
TV.
Granddad's always got one in his
So
phone.
butterscotch, yeah. Can't have those adverts on anymore. So yeah, I think it's a cracking whiskey to finish up on.
Yeah.
And
And what's really nice about heavily peated for me is, again, when you're comparing those kind of Islay peaty, Campbelltown peat or Kilkerran peat, I mean, the peat that we use at the distillery doesn't come from Campbelltown now. It comes from the north of Scotland and the east coast of Scotland. And obviously the composition of that peat is a wee bit different to the west coast. And I think that carries through in the whiskies. For me, this is just so, the peat smoke is so sweet and kind of, I don't know, almost like fruity peat smoke. It's really strange. It's
We were
very
discussing in
different.
the office or
And I
online
love it, it's
recently
lovely.
about the the peat and heather and
Yeah.
the floralness to it as well.
It's different. It doesn't have that sort of medicinal characteristic, that kind of iodine note that you might expect from a very peaty whiskey, because I mean we talked earlier about the ppm and someone wanted to know the difference between heavily peated and our regular sort of range, and which we said was about 10 to 15 ppm. With the heavily peated, it's about 80 ppm.
I was 80, yeah.
Yeah. So it's a really, I mean, it is what it says in the label. It's heavily peated.
yeah, I think you're right about this sort of peat profile that gives you, or the peat that we use has a much more sort of soft, it's campfire embers.
Yes, it's like
yeah,
toasted sort of bubbly
yeah,
marshmallows.
exactly. That's sort of the pink
Yeah.
marshmallows specifically.
Yeah.
For me, it's that sort of lovely sort of sweetness, fruitness. Great
Yeah, there's
combination.
That barbecue note to it, yeah.
Yeah, it's lovely.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you know we would use peat, but it's not available so much. You know, it's not so much available to us in Campbelltown.
And also there's some people say that the peat quality is quite a sandy peat. It's not the best quality, so, and conservation, things like that as well. So yeah, a variety of things that, but we've taken it from the sort of north of Scotland for a long time now, and it works quite well, I think, in our favour.
It's lovely.
Did you know 14 grams, you shouldn't have a favourite because it's like picking your favourite child.
Where would you pick? Where would? Could you pick a favourite?
I honestly
I'm pretty
really
sold.
like heavily peated.
Yeah, I'm sold in the heavily peat. I think it's absolutely fantastic. Maybe because
I like the
it's quite
flavours as
different.
well.
Maybe because it's quite different from the previous 13 though. It's that variation that's sort of making it stand out.
I'd like to go back to the 15-year bourbon for the UK.
Yeah, no, you're not wrong with that. Mhm. Well,
Bit biased towards that one.
yeah, I think we'll need to open up the archive bottles with this heavily peated.
So this is heavily peated for matured for 5 years. And that leads us on actually because we've got quite an exciting announcement for this Friday.
Good, very well
Okay,
remembered.
Before we finish up today, what was I meant to say at the end of the tasting?
So yeah, this Friday we have a planned launch for the Kilkerran, the next batch of the heavily peated peat and progress range.
So batch 4.
Batch 4 is coming up, yeah. So Friday, look out, yeah. Local retailers. It will be available throughout the UK come Friday and selected for European markets, obviously with shipments, with Brexit delays, etc. But we hope to have it in several European markets as well come Friday.
So if it's not in your market on Friday, don't panic. It's probably on its way to you.
Yeah, there's quite a few shipments on the way at the moment, so they'll be there soon. And that one is 80%, like the batch 3, if anyone had the chance to get that, it's the same maturation, so about 80% bourbon, ex-bourbon, and 20% ex-sherry Oloroso influence.
Right, well, I don't know about you guys, but I think I'm ready for a pint in Burnside.
I know. Or the feathers. The feather seems to be a popular one. But yeah, Burnside with the feathers, which is in true Campbelltown Malts festival style. I think.
Keep the party going.
Keep the party going.
Good.
Yeah, well, thanks very much.
Yeah,
I hope you all enjoyed the tasting. The privilege doing this tasting and trying all these drams side by side. And I hope you certainly get a feel for it and try, think, oh yes, there is a difference between ports, Olorosos and the phenols, etc. But we do hope to see you all back down here in Campbelltown in the near future. Safe and well.
Yeah.
All right.
Cheers.
Slàinte.
Slàinte.